This happened 4 years ago, and I haven't gone hiking since. Every time I see photos of the Appalachian Trail, my chest tightens, and I have to look away. I was 23 at the time, fresh out of college, and dealing with a rough breakup. My friend, who I'll call Derek, suggested we spend a long weekend hiking a section of the trail through West Virginia. He'd done it twice before, and promised it would clear my head. We planned a 3-day trip, camping at designated sites along the way. I'd never been much of an outdoors person, but I trusted Derek. He knew these mountains. The first 2 days were exactly what I needed. The October air was crisp, the leaves were turning, and there's something about the Appalachians that makes you feel impossibly small. The ridges seem to stretch forever, layered on top of each other like ancient sleeping giants. We passed a few other hikers, exchanged the usual nods and small talk, and made camp each night without incident. I was starting to understand why people did this. The silence, the simplicity, just walking. It was on the 3rd day that things changed. We were about 6 miles from the trailhead where Derek's car was parked, when we passed an older man sitting on a fallen log just off the trail. He looked to be in his 60s, wearing clothes that seemed too thin for the weather, just a flannel shirt and work pants. No pack, no gear, no water bottle. Just sitting there, watching us approach. His hands rested on his knees, completely still. Derek gave him a wave. Beautiful day for it. The man didn't respond, didn't wave back, didn't even blink. He just stared at us with this blank expression as we walked past. I remember thinking his eyes looked strange. Not the color, but the way they fixed on us. Like he was memorizing something, taking inventory. Weird guy, I muttered once we were out of earshot. Derek shrugged. You get all types out here. Locals mostly. They've been walking these hills their whole lives. I wanted to ask how a local could be 6 miles from the nearest road with no supplies, but I let it go. About an hour later, we stopped at a creek to refill our water bottles. The water was ice cold and crystal clear, and I was kneeling on a rock watching my bottle fill, when something made me look back the way we'd come. The old man was there, maybe 200 yards behind us on the trail, just standing, watching. His arms hung at his sides. I grabbed Derek's arm. When he saw the man, his expression shifted. I'd never seen Derek look unsettled before. This was a guy who'd done solo camping trips in bear country, but something in his face changed. He screwed the cap on his bottle without taking his eyes off the figure. Let's pick up the pace, he said quietly. We hiked faster. The trail curved and dipped through dense forest, crossing ridges and dropping into hollows where the trees blocked out most of the light. I kept checking over my shoulder. For the next 20 minutes, I didn't see him. The trail behind us stayed empty. I started to relax, telling myself we'd probably imagined it. Maybe he was just another hiker going the same direction. Maybe he'd taken a side trail. Then Derek stopped. So suddenly, I almost walked into him. The old man was ahead of us now, standing right in the middle of the trail, maybe 50 feet away. There was no way he could have passed us. The trail was the only path through this section, with dense rhododendron thickets on either side. We would have seen him. We would have heard him. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knows something you don't. You boys are making good time, he said. His voice carried clearly despite the distance, echoing slightly off the surrounding hills. Should reach the parking lot before dark. If nothing slows you down. Derek's hand moved to his belt, where he kept a hunting knife. I could see his knuckles going white around the handle. Who are you? The man tilted his head at an angle that seemed just slightly wrong. These mountains have long memories. They remember everyone who walks through them, everyone who gets lost. He paused, and his smile widened. Everyone who doesn't come back. Derek grabbed my arm and pulled me off trail, crashing through the underbrush. I didn't argue. We ran. Branches whipped my face, thorns tore at my pants, my pack bouncing painfully against my back. Neither of us looked behind us. We just ran until we hit another section of trail and sprinted the remaining distance to the parking lot. Derek's car was the only vehicle there. We threw ourselves inside, and he peeled out of that lot so fast the tires kicked gravel against the undercarriage. I looked back once as we drove away. At the tree line, just where the trail emerged from the forest, the old man stood watching. He raised one hand in a slow wave. I don't know who he was, or what he was. Derek and I don't talk about it. But I've done some research since then, and that section of trail has had 3 disappearances in the past decade. Hikers who simply vanished. no bodies ever found. I think about them sometimes. I think about what might have happened if we'd been slower. If we hadn't run. This happened when I was 19, and it's the reason I sold my grandmother's property the moment the estate cleared probate. I didn't even go back for the furniture. My grandmother lived alone in a hollow in eastern Kentucky, about 40 minutes from the nearest town. She'd been there her whole life, raised my mother in that house, and refused to leave even after my grandfather passed. The family begged her to move somewhere closer, somewhere with neighbors, but she always said the same thing. I was born in these hills. I'll die in these hills. And she did. When she passed in the fall of 2019, the property went to me since my mother had died a few years earlier. I drove out to assess the place and figure out what to do with it. The house was old but sturdy. 2 stories, wraparound porch, sitting in a clearing surrounded by forest that climbed up the hillside in every direction. The nearest neighbor was about a mile down the gravel road. No cell service, no streetlights. It was isolated in a way that felt oppressive rather than peaceful, like the mountains were pressing in from all sides. I planned to spend 3 nights there, sorting through her belongings and meeting with a real estate agent. The first night was uneventful, if you don't count the constant creaking of the old house settling or the way the wind made the trees moan. I slept in my grandmother's room, which felt strange, but it was the only bed that had been used recently. The sheets still smelled like her lavender soap. The second night, around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound. Footsteps on the wraparound porch. I lay there, frozen, listening. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, measured. They started at the front of the house. I could track their progress by the creaking boards and moved around the side, toward the back. Then they stopped directly below my window. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The floorboards groaned once, like someone shifting their weight, and then nothing. Silence. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps resumed, completing the circuit around the house. Then, silence again. I convinced myself it was an animal. A deer, maybe. I didn't sleep much after that, but I told myself it was nothing. The next morning, I found footprints in the soft dirt around the house. Human footprints. Bare feet. They circled the entire structure, and in several places, it looked like whoever made them had stopped and stood for a while, facing the walls, facing the windows. One set of prints was directly beneath my bedroom window, pressed deep into the mud like someone had stood there for a long time. Looking up, I called the sheriff's office. A deputy came out around noon, looked at the prints, and got very quiet. He was an older man, the kind who'd probably lived in these hills his whole life. He walked the perimeter twice, then came back to where I was standing on the porch. "How long you planning to stay?" he asked. "1 more night," I said. "I have to finish sorting through her things." He shook his head slowly. "I'd leave today if I were you. Your grandmother. She understood certain things about living out here. Knew when to leave offerings. Knew which nights to keep the doors locked and the curtains drawn." He looked at me with something like pity. "There's folks in these hills who don't take kindly to outsiders. Even if your grandmother lived here, you're not from here. They know." I asked what he meant by they. He wouldn't answer directly. Just told me to lock up and leave before dark. I didn't listen. I had 1 more day of sorting to do, and I figured I could handle 1 more night. I'd lock the doors, keep a light on, and leave first thing in the morning. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the living room with every light in the house on, a kitchen knife on the table beside me, watching the windows. The darkness outside was absolute. Around 1 a.m., the footsteps started again. But this time, they were inside the house. The attic. I could hear someone walking slowly across the attic floor above me. Back and forth. Back and forth. The footsteps were heavy, deliberate, like someone pacing. I had checked the attic the day I arrived. It was empty except for boxes of old clothes and Christmas decorations. There was no way anyone could have gotten up there without me seeing them. The only access was a door at the top of a narrow staircase off the second-floor hallway. Then the footsteps moved toward the attic stairs. I heard the creak of the old door at the top of the staircase. Heard it groan open. I ran. I grabbed my keys and phone, and nothing else. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I ran to my car and drove away from that house at 60 miles per hour down a gravel road in the pitch dark. I didn't look back. I called the real estate agent the next week and told her to sell the house as is. I didn't care about the furniture, the heirlooms, any of it. Take everything. burn it for all I cared. She mentioned that finding a buyer might be difficult. When I asked why, she paused for a long time. "People around here know that house," she said finally. "They know what lives there. Your grandmother knew too. That's why she never left. She had an arrangement." I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't want to know. The house sold 8 months later, to someone from out of state. I hope they didn't stay long. This happened last summer, and I still don't drive at night if I can help it. What I saw on Highway 321 through the Great Smoky Mountains changed something in me, broke something that I don't think will ever heal. I'm a traveling nurse, 31 years old, and I was driving from a contract in Knoxville to a new assignment in Asheville. I'd worked a 12-hour shift and should have waited until morning to make the drive, but I wanted to sleep in my own rented bed that night. So around 10 p.m., I started the 3-hour drive, most of it through the winding mountain roads of the Smokies. The first hour was fine. Traffic thinned out quickly, and soon I was alone on the road, just my headlights cutting through the dark. The mountains rose up on either side, black shapes against a cloudy sky. No moon, no stars. Just the endless tunnel of trees illuminated by my high beams, the road twisting ahead of me like a snake. Around 11:15, I came around a curve and saw someone standing on the shoulder of the road. It was a woman, young, maybe early 20s. She was wearing a light summer dress, white or cream-colored, totally wrong for the cool mountain night. She stood completely still, facing away from me, looking into the forest. Her hair was long and dark, hanging straight down her back. I slowed down, thinking maybe she needed help. Car trouble, maybe. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. There was no car, no flashlight, no phone screen glowing in her hand. Nothing. Just this woman standing alone in the absolute middle of nowhere, facing the trees like she was waiting for something. I should have stopped. That's what you're supposed to do. But every instinct I had screamed at me to keep driving. The hair on my arms stood up. My hands tightened on the wheel. So I did. I passed her slowly, and as my headlights swept over her, I saw her head turn to follow my car. Her face was pale, expressionless, eyes too wide, reflecting my headlights like an animal's. I pressed the accelerator and didn't look back. 10 minutes later, I came around another curve. My heart stopped. She was there again. Same woman, same dress, same position, facing away from the road into the trees. The exact same posture, hands at her sides. But I'd been driving at least 50 miles per hour. There was no way, no possible way. I didn't slow down this time. I sped up. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I turned on the radio, hoping music would help, but it was just static. Nothing but static, no matter what station I tried. For the next 20 minutes, I drove as fast as I safely could, taking the curves at speeds that made my tires squeal. I was crying. I don't remember starting, but tears were streaming down my face, and my breathing was ragged, close to hyperventilating. Then I saw her a third time. This time she was different. She was standing in the middle of the road, facing my car. I slammed on the brakes, fishtailing slightly before coming to a stop about 30 feet from where she stood. She didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me through my windshield. In my headlights, I could see her clearly now. Her dress was stained with mud and something darker. Her feet were bare and caked with dirt. Her eyes were open too wide, the whites showing all around her irises. Then, slowly, she raised one hand and pointed. Not at me, past me, behind me. Every horror movie tells you not to look, but I couldn't help it. I glanced in my rearview mirror. There was someone sitting in my back seat. A figure. Dark. Wrong. I couldn't make out features. Just a shape that shouldn't have been there. Sitting directly behind me, and I felt cold breath on my neck. I screamed. I floored the accelerator. I drove straight at the woman in the road, and at the last second, she simply stepped aside, smooth and unhurried. I caught a glimpse of her face as I passed. She was smiling. I drove 90 miles per hour until I hit the Asheville city limits. I pulled into the first gas station I saw, jumped out of my car, and threw open the back door. Empty. The back seat was empty, but there was a smell. Faint, but unmistakable. Damp earth. Rotting leaves. The smell of something that had been buried and dug back up. I reported what happened to the local police, and they took my statement with blank expressions, like they'd heard it all before. When I finished, the officer sighed and rubbed his eyes. "You're not the first," he said. "That stretch of 321 has stories going back decades. Woman in white, they call her. Some folks say she's looking for someone who left her there a long time ago." I asked what happens to the people who stop for her. He just shook his head. "We don't know. They don't come back to tell us." I still make that drive sometimes for work, but only in daylight. And I never, ever look in the rearview mirror.